Hello everyone, this is Darkest Hour Reads, and today I want to give you some spooky recommendations for this season because I know that you guys love spooky recommendations and love spooky books, and I happen to have a lot, so let's start. So as you can see here, there are a total of 5 books over here. I think I want to start with the top 5 recommendation that I have, and then go to the top one, which is my favorite book ever. Yeah, so I will start with a little small summary and why do I like this book, or why do I like the books in general, and what are things that could be improved. Starting with top 5, at the bottom of the list is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Just because this book is in top 5, it doesn't mean that I do not really like it. It's just that I think what I thought when I first read it, that there were some missing parts that I would have really enjoyed. Probably I also had very high expectations of this book in general, just because of how iconic this book is in our culture, basically, or like at least in Western horror Victorian culture. So the main story of this book is just basically someone called Dr. Jekyll, who basically starts acting erratically out of nowhere, and obviously all his friends are quite scared for him, or like are kind of preoccupied of what is going on around him. And basically along the story, we find out that there's a strange man running around the town, and basically he is very, very aggressive. So he kills people, he tries to abuse women or abuse other people as well. He's just basically disgusting to look at as well, right? To look at as well. So basically along the lines, we find out that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are the same person, and it's basically Dr. Jekyll who had these very severe and very aggressive thoughts. He just wanted to separate his life into basically just be the good person of Dr. Jekyll, or like have the good life of Dr. Jekyll, and then be able to do or have all these like crazy experiences as Mr. Hyde. I think what I like the most about this book is the fact that they put a lot of context of like clinical psychology and psychopathology, which is something that I have always been very passionate about. I actually have a degree in clinical psychology, so I really, really enjoy that part because it's something that I enjoy myself. And the thing that I didn't really enjoy about this book, it could probably be because of my expectations from this book, but what I didn't really enjoy was the fact that we don't get any sort of context whatsoever about Mr. Hyde, for example, or about the characters themselves. I do understand that it's a short story, like it's really tiny, so that could also be part of why we don't get that much context. But yeah, I just wish we had gotten more context. Also, something that I don't really understand about this book, and it could be definitely something that I could talk about in another video, but it's just basically how misunderstood this book is in general, because obviously we have seen in culture or in general that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are two separate entities in the same body, and that Dr. Jekyll really, really struggles with Mr. Hyde in the sense of he doesn't want Mr. Hyde to exist, right? And he creates this substance to basically make this just try to be like a good person, try to be what Dr. Jekyll is supposed to be, right? But in like the feeling that I got from this book is that actually Dr. Jekyll is very, very aware of his thoughts of Mr. Hyde in general, and he doesn't really want to hide it. He's just trying to change his appearance in order to do evil, right? Like that is the main point of the book, or at least how I understood it, right? I think there is a lot of misunderstanding from this book, which also made me like it a little bit more, but also made me be like slightly disappointed in the book as well. It's just a complicated situation. But yeah, in general, this book is really, really nice. If you have like an afternoon off or like an evening, a free evening, and you just want to read something quick, this book is for you. Then the next book in top 4 is Dracula, which first of all, I find crazy the fact that I'm putting this book in top 4, but it's just that the other books are just so incredible. I have to say that I love this book. I love Dracula. I love anything related to vampires, like, for example, Carmilla. Carmilla is such an amazing book as well. But Dracula just has a very, very special place in my heart. And it's just so incredible. It's so good. Basically, a little bit of a summary for those who don't know about Dracula. Is just basically the story of a gentleman who starts making business with an old Romanian guy. I think he's Romanian, yeah, with an old Romanian, very upper class gentleman, and basically he is sent to Romania, to Transylvania, by his boss, and basically stays in the Dracula's castle for like a period of time. And it's just basically how the main character discovers that Dracula is a vampire, and basically them trying, well, he and his friend group and his wife trying to basically eliminate this evil from the world. I have to say that I might be a little biased because I love Dracula so much. Like, I love vampires in general, right? And everything regarding the vampire aesthetic, obviously the religious motives, the cannibalism, the blood, gore, the gothic experiences, right? Like, this is just everything that I enjoy in one book. And I would never say anything bad about this book, but the only thing that I could say possibly is that sometimes there's so many descriptions and there's so many things that are going on at the same time that sometimes I got a little bit lost. But the book is just like, it's just so well connected all together, and at the end of the day everything makes sense, and it's just so delicious. I really love this book and I'm obsessed with it. And if you want to read Dracula, I recommend that you read it during winter. It just makes so much more sense and it's just so much more immersive. I love it. This is a 10 out of 10. First of all, I have to apologize for the constant change in light. There's nothing I can do to control it because it's just basically the sun's problem. This is what happens when you live in England, and it's that the sun comes out and disappears all the time, and you can't really change the weather. One time, like 1 hour at 9 a.m. it's sunny, and then 2 hours later it's just raining, and then the sun comes out again. So that's just the reality of living in England. But now we're getting into the top 3 picks of scary book recommendations, and I have to say that with all the pain in my heart, The Picture of Dorian Gray is on top 3. Not because I don't like this book. In fact, I think this book is phenomenal, but it's just because the top 2 and top 1 books are just it's just over the top. But yeah, just starting with the book, a little bit of a summary. It's just basically Basil, who is an artist, who is a painter, is absolutely infatuated with a socialite who is Dorian Gray over here, and basically he's so infatuated. They are very close friends, but they have been getting very close for the past months, and Basil decides to paint a portrait of Dorian Gray, and basically he becomes obsessed with this painting because he feels like there is a part of his soul in this painting, right? And over the span of some years, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read it quite a long time ago. But yeah, on the span of some years, he realizes that all the bad actions that he does as a person, they don't appear in his body, or he doesn't age, but the painting does. So obviously he becomes more and more obsessed about the painting in general, decides to hide it so no one else can see it, and then things happen basically. I heard that this book is getting another adaptation, I think on Netflix, if I am not mistaken, where Dorian Gray and Basil are brothers for some reason, and if you don't know anything about this book or about Oscar Wilde in general, Oscar Wilde was a queer author and writer. He was openly gay at that time. Obviously, we're talking about the 1800s, so there's there's not a lot that you could do to be openly gay. But yeah, basically, he was a queer author that was in prison because of him being openly homosexual, and they used this book as proof that he was a homosexual. So the fact that someone is doing an adaptation of this book where the two main characters are straight and they are siblings is just straight up nuts. And that is the one thing that I dislike about this book, and it's the fact, like, the interpretations that people do. It's just like, you do realize that this book means a lot, right? Like, this book is not just a scary story book. Like, this is a representation of society at that time, right? And like, there's a lot of like queer behaviors, queer and homosexual behaviors over here, and like a homosexual representation, and the fact that we are trying to minimize all these representations that really does matter and did matter at that time. I just think it's outrageous, and that's the one thing that I don't like about this book. Now we are going into top 2, and this book is so special to me. Well, there are 2 books that I'm missing here are very special, but this one is specifically very special for me because this book is the one that made me start this journey of doing big recommendations of starting my TikTok account, my Instagram account, just to recommend some books. So this book will always have a special place in my heart, and it's The Power by Naomi Alderman. This book was like crack, okay? Like, this book is just one of the most insane and most beautiful books that I have ever read. If you ever tell me one book that I have to recommend for the rest of my life, it would be this one. Like, with no doubts whatsoever. This book deserves to be a classic. Even though obviously it was released in 2017, if I am not mistaken, this book should be a classic and should be considered a classic. And I hope that in 100 years, this book becomes a classic because it's just that good. So the summary of this book is basically society as of now, but out of nowhere, women start discovering that they have a power that no man has, and it's just basically that they can release electricity out of their limbs, like, for example, their fingers, their hands, or like some of them like from the rest of their body. And it's just basically a gradual process of women discovering that they have the upper hand in society, and they start controlling men and start controlling the society, and everything becomes a matriarchal society. There is a lot of religious aspects and motives in this book, which I think made it so much more better. Like, this made it so much better. And I think the way it is written is just so beautiful, so gruesome, so bold, pun intended, but it's just so good in general. And I think actually my boss read this book. This book was recommended by a friend of mine, so everyone that I know that has read this book thinks that this book is fantastic. So if you don't value my opinion, you can value my friend's opinion as well, or my boss's opinion as well. This is just incredible. It is a 10 out of 10. It's an 11 out of 10. This is one of my favorite books, and this is the most special book for me as well. And I think I found it, like, this book, what I really liked about this is the fact that it just becomes so great. Like, the path between patriarchal society to matriarchal society is so gradual that you don't even notice at first. Because when I first started reading the book, I was like, yes, girl, like, keep going, you know? But then slowly but surely, there are little things that like start to not make sense to you, and you're like, that is suspicious, that is not good behavior, that is not good practice, right? But like, you just let it slide because obviously, like, horrible things have happened to women in the past, like human existence. Like, I can't even count how many years, because it has always been like that. And then worse things keep happening, and then it's like, okay, this is not something that I can in good conscience support, right? So it's just like the path between patriarchy to matriarchy is just so gradual that you don't even realize, and then it gets to a point where it's just like, oh shit, like this is wrong, like this is not okay, like this is not equality, right? Like this is just literally the contrary. And this book is just so good. I have no qualms with it. There's nothing wrong about this book. If they asked me to change something, I would just make it longer, because I just want to hear it, like I just want to read it more. And then last but not least, this is a top one. It has to be one of my favorite books ever. And this book, I have also such a deep connection with it, is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, obviously. By the way, I'm grabbing it like that because this painting shows a little bit of an ass crack. And last time I posted it on TikTok, I got banned. Well, not banned, but like my content got down because I was showing naked, like I was showing a naked man, and it's just a little bit of a crack. Come on, man. But yeah, basically, this is one of my favorite books ever, if not my favorite book. It's just so incredible, and I love Mary Shelley so much. Like, it just makes me so emotional to talk about Mary Shelley. I feel like I have a connection with her, or like at least with this book in general. Like, this book has changed my life, right? Or changed my life when I first read it, and I just love it so much. To start the summary, basically Frankenstein is about a guy called Victor Frankenstein, obviously, who goes into uni, goes into college to learn about medicine, chemistry, physics, whatever, and becomes obsessed with death, in the sense of he wants to bring people back from death, right? And basically creates his own human and gives him like some life, and then obviously he realizes how wrong that is and how monstrous his creation is, and basically just abandons him. And the monster obviously goes crazy. He learns a language. Well, he learns how to speak, he learns how to behave, but still, obviously, because he's a monster, he is not loved. He's basically rejected by society in general, and obviously his creator as well, by Victor. So he just basically goes on a killing spree, on a rampage, and just literally ruins Victor Frankenstein's life. When I first read the book, what I enjoyed the most was the way of how accurate the feelings that Mary Shelley was describing from the monster were, right? Like, I found phenomenal how well she described his loneliness, his anger, his wrath, his resentment towards Victor and towards everyone in society, because of the fact that he was rejected, right? Because he was different. And I remember I found it so relatable. I found all the acts of the monster, except the killing, obviously, but I found all his acts so understanding and so relatable to his experience, to his pain, because obviously, as someone who was not accepted when I was a teenager, that's another story for another day. As someone who is very familiar with those experiences, I remember that the most intense feeling that I would feel at that time wasn't really loneliness. It was resentment. It was anger, right? I felt betrayed. I felt just wrath towards anything and everything that was around me, right? Like, it wasn't more of the fact, like, it was not the fact that I was lonely that I was angry about. It was the fact that I was actively being rejected, right? I was like, how dare you reject me? What is wrong with me? You know that, like, I'm trying my best, I'm a good person, and like, it's not my, like, it wasn't my problem, or like, it was not my fault that I was like that, right? Or that I was being rejected. I was just being rejected for no reason, right? Now I realize it was because I was different, but that's also another story for another day. But yeah, I remember very, very vividly how angry I was all the time, how much I resented my parents, for example, my family in general, or my friends, and everyone around me. The only thing that I would feel was resentment. And that is something that we see in the book all the time. And this is like all like the way that Mary Shelley presented all these feelings are just so raw, and they are so truthful to the character. It just made me like feel so many things all at once. I think this book hurt me and healed me at the same time. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. And then after reading the book, I went to Leo Google and I started researching about Mary Shelley, obviously because she was one of the first female authors that I read, well, classic female authors that I read, and I just became obsessed with her because like it just made so much sense to me that this is a story of her life, right? Or like this is the story that comes from her experience, and she feels like the monster. And I think that she herself, when she wrote it, she felt like she was the monster, right? And all those feelings are way too real. Like they are way too accurate for someone to just like have written them with no context whatsoever, right? And like when I learned about Mary Shelley's story, about how her mother passed away very early on, she had a very good relationship with her father until he got remarried, and basically her stepmother did not want anything to do with her. She hated her guts. Her sister, I think her sister and her got along, but yeah, it's basically like how rejected she was from her family, how rejected she felt from her peers, for example, from her society, as like a 16-year-old girl just like dating an older man who is Percy Shelley, who was 21, who was married as well, and who basically was pig. Like, if there are two people that I hate, the first one has to be Percy Shelley. When I die and I go to hell, because I know I'm going to hell, I'm not going to heaven, I'm going to hell, the first thing that I will do will go to Percy Shelley and he's on sight. Like, I am just going straight ahead like a cow with like, not with like a horse with like those two things over here that don't allow him to like see anything else, and he just has tunnel vision. I just go straight ahead and he's on sight. Like, I'm just going to like throw him, like take his ghost ass and just throw him into like the fucking lava so he can die again, and then I can go again, because he just pisses me off so much. And the second one is Ted Hughes, who is Sylvia Plath's ex-husband, who also was a piece of shit towards her. So I just take them two and just grab them and just throw him into the lava, because they are the most disgusting people that I have ever seen. Like, obviously there are very other terrible people, but like these two specifically, like there's something against them. And these hands are rated E for everyone, especially ghost people, and especially Percy Shelley and Ted Hughes. Now, going back to the topic, because I just got lost on my hatred towards Percy Shelley, I think in general, Frankenstein is just a collection or a recollection of Mary Shelley's feeling towards her whole situation and her life situation in general. Because after confirming that she was with Percy Shelley, she basically got disowned by her family, who already wasn't liked by them, and also she got rejected by society, so she had to flee the country, and then she was in extreme poverty. Like, we're talking about her not being able to eat and like her miscarrying because of that, right? So I think Frankenstein is just a collection or a recollection of all the feelings that she had towards that situation and her life situation in general. That's why I think Frankenstein is so special in general, not only because of how well it's written, but also because it collects and it shows the real feelings of someone who is rejected. And it's not the loneliness. Like, the main problem with loneliness is not that you don't have anyone. It's the main problem is that you resent people for not being with you, right? No matter what kind of person you are, if you are extroverted or if you're introverted, we as humans are social animals, and obviously we gather into community and we prefer to be with our communities. So the fact that she was so alienated from what she had known in the past, and she was just openly rejected, no one wanted to accept her, no one wanted to talk to her. She had no money whatsoever. She was in extreme poverty, and the way that she felt not only rejected but felt resentment towards everything that happened to her, right? Like, she hadn't had a good life from the start, like with her stepmother, with her sister, with her father, and then with everyone else in society, her friends, the rest of her family. So she just felt lonely and rejected. That's why Frankenstein is just my favorite book ever. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that you guys read any of these books because they are just incredible. And if you have read any of them or you want to read them, please put it on my comments or talk to me in my social media. Or if you have any other recommendations, you know that I'm always happy to read more books. Please let me know, and yeah, I will review them soon. See you guys. Bye.